One more series to close out the day here. Only one of these teams will keep their hopes and dreams alive in the China region. My name is Rich. I'm going to be your host, and we got Salute and Jack on the desk right now to cast all of the action. Guys, it's YingYingYing versus Shepi. Now, I know you didn't actually get to cast these last matches, Salute, so we're going to start off with you, Jack. We're going to let Salute prepare his beautiful thoughts and that beautiful bald head of his. But you right now, you're all coiled up like a snake ready to go on this one. Let's talk about the healers.
One of the interesting things we've seen throughout the night was not only been a pretty decent diversity of healers, but it's also been just the constant kind of battle between Holy Pally and Restoration Druid. You know, you're able to see, you know, for example, when you're going up against someone like the Bursting or against like the Grievous, you know, you see the Paladin's able to really pump up the healing onto those targets, getting everybody really topped off very easily with Beacon of Virtues. But it's also going to be interesting seeing, you know, when we saw like the Karazhan in the last game, the last series, we're able to see, you know, the variance you're having with the single target healing, the single target focus, whereas, you know, the chilled or the ice phase wasn't really that impactful to either team because it was the last phase they really had to worry about. But when you're having to deal with the Flame Wreath, you know, having one of the teams, for example, wiping to the Flame Wreath just because they weren't able to pump out the single target healing, they weren't having the focus, whereas the Paladin takes Beacon of Faith, puts Beacon on both targets, totally safe. Good thing you mentioned Karazhan, because it's time to make our return to Karazhan. Guys, this is going to be the last series of 22 keys that we will see in this tournament. From here on out, it's going to be 23s and 24s. And now we are going to go back to Karazhan. YingYingYing versus Shepi. This is a best of 3. The loser goes home.
God, Jack, I missed you.
Oh, I missed you too.
It's been so many hours.
Guys, it's been ages.
Yeah, Rich, you're all right. So, as we do know, of course, at the start of the polls here, you know, similar to what you guys just saw in the last series where we're going to have those MCs on those spirits going up, likely they will unleash those upstairs with the constructs, of course, Jack.
Yeah, and it's really cool to see where they have, for example, 2 DKs that are able to get, you know, both the enslaves off, and it really makes it a lot easier, for example, for them to be able to take out these mobs. So they did like release one, for example, and then they're able to just grab another one, pull them all into the double construct.
You know, Shepi actually opted to kill that first spirit and then move up in the meantime, so a bit of time dump there, and, you know, some percent that they're not going to have to make up later, of course, but some time lost nonetheless. You know, they could have dealt with that MC plus probably, well, maybe Repentance on the ad, or they could have pulled that closer ad over to the robot, so there's definitely a bit of advantage in YingYingYing's favor right now. Of course, pulling it to the side of the stairs, as we do know, is common strategy with those robots, allowing the, during those kind of arcane storms for the static storms, rather, of course, for the casters to sit on the middle of the stairs safely away from the storms and keep their damage going.
Yeah, one of the things in the last series that I wanted to see a little bit better of was the nullifiers. You know, having the healers, honestly, just get out of the way of the DPS, making it a lot easier for the DPSers to get those buffs. We saw a number of times where, you know, the healers just unnecessarily kind of standing in the way, getting those buffs. You are saying, I mean, one healer got out of the way right to the grave.
I mean, you know, they're doing a much sketchier pull here, Shepi. In the meantime, you know, we do have the healer go down. They don't have that kind of beauty of the stairs on the side in order to kind of dodge that storm safely while still healing or DPS and whatever they may need to do. In the meantime, of course, the nullifier making sure YingYingYing pulling a lot of the packs around the corner for the nullifier, taking advantage of that damage increase, which spawns about every 15 seconds on one of the players.
Yeah, when you're seeing just that huge damage buff going out, you can only have 2 of those damage buffs out at a time, so they're making sure that they're just clearing out almost as much as possible. They got everything but the last L of the mana confluences there, so tremendous amount of trash picked up, cleared out, and as they get that down, they're able to go instantly into the boss. It's an excellent transition there.
Straight into Curator, and of course, if you didn't tune into the last series, we do know that on Curator, he will have about 1 minute in that primary phase where he will spawn those static zones on the ground, and of course, these volatile energies. Now, these are the most dangerous, Jack, right? The longer they live, the more damage they do, and they hop around and do some pulsing damage on the raid. Good job stacking up from YingYingYing here in the meantime, but if you don't kill those arcanes, the static adds pretty quickly, they can add up to quite a bit of damage on the group.
Well, it puts more stress on it, and that's the idea, is you want to be able to get everything stacked up in together. That way it's easier to actually hit, but by stacking up, you're just making your entire group a target of the splash AoE damage when the energy wants to jump. So it's just such a huge focus on making sure you're getting everyone stacked up, make sure you're killing all these energies before they actually die. And again, you're seeing YingYingYing following a similar kind of circular strategy. That way they're able to kind of steadily pivot and start moving towards the exit here to maximize their time.
Right, the Curator does have a massive hitbox. In the meantime, you'd have to, you know, one other problem that these volatile energies provide is that they can spawn these orbs. Now, we do see the healer go down again for YingYingYing, and they're going to have to, I mean, they're going to have to get that battle res up right away. Soon enough, we're going to hit that EV evocation stage, which is a 20-second phase. Here we are right now, where the boss takes 100% increased damage. So everybody's going to pump out as much as they can in this tyrannical setting. You can see the Curator's health melting down. In the meantime, of course, Shepi on the right side of the screen has also just now pulled Curator.
Yeah, it looks like some kind of miscommunication between YingYingYing and the rest of the group, or between their healer, where he basically zigged instead of zagged. He's cut off from the group, and he just tried to catch up and ended up running over a lot of the electrical energies on the ground. So some kind of odd miscommunication, but YingYingYing has tremendous boss damage here, getting him already down to 20% after the first evocate there. Just excellent focus there by the DPS.
Yeah, so they'll be able to kind of, I like what they're doing too. They're kind of started with a strat pulling away from the exit of the room, and they're curling back, U-turning back towards the end, so that by the time the Curator dies, they'll be able to exit towards the end of the room and save a few of those seconds, especially with some of the immobile classes like the 2 DKs they have, and just get right into that RP cutscene that they'll, of course, end right away and start working their way to Medivh.
Yeah, like, it was interesting to talk about how we said, everyone's practiced, upper Karazhan, everyone had to for the time trials, but you're really seeing just such a massive improvement from YingYingYing compared to the last series, or even compared to their opponent right now, where they're able to get the boss just so low here and already be moving on to Medivh in just short order.
Yeah, so I mean, we can see for Shepi over there on the side too, they just finished the first evocation phase, and they actually were a fair bit higher on percentage for the Curator, so they'll likely have to go to that second evocation phase, while in the meantime, YingYingYing is already moving towards Shade of Medivh. Now, likely, I will expect that we do see a CC on the Demon Mob from them, although I'm not sure who would... Oh, no, yeah, they can manage, so they do have a CC. I don't know if they'll end up using it or not. They actually go around the other way because they did not have a favorable pat from that mage in the meantime, although you can aggro that mage and then just jump down to the Blade Lord in the meantime, and that mage will oftentimes reset.
Yep, and that's the big thing to kind of think about is you do have, that opportunity there. Just kind of run around the back rather than having to worry about in case you need to be standing up there a little bit longer, or you don't want to be having any, of course, of the extra, casts that are going on the entire group. But yeah, they're just going to deal with the Blade Lord. I really enjoy how they are pulling up the Flamebringer. That way they don't have to worry about any of the patches on the ground. I think it's always just something that's always too accepted by people to say, oh, well, he spawns in this room, so we have to deal with him. No, you just pull him up, and it's so much easier to deal with, and it's much easier from a tank perspective as well.
You do have to be careful, though, because he will, of course, periodically blink, dropping all threat and cleave in the meantime, too. So if some of the players are trailing a bit too far behind, he'll blink a fair bit away. But nonetheless, no problem for the DKs there, of course, moving into Shade of Medivh's room. If I'm not mistaken, we do have a set order of Arcane followed by Flame Wreath here. So we will see the Arcane coming up first. We'll have to see how they decide to split their damage. Of course, a few different strategies they can implement, either by splitting some of the damage on the Arcane birds that spawn, or just, destroying one of them quickly to kind of relieve some of that huge damage on the group that you're no stranger to.
That's right, and the nice thing about that, though, is, it is tyrannical, where they will, have better opportunities to start splitting damage up on those birds, because the birds are buffed by Fortified, not by Tyrannical. The big lethal thing you need to worry about here is Tyrannical Flame Wreath. So, you do have that opportunity there, as long as your healer's going to be comfortable with it, and as long as you're not expending too much mana as your healer, having to deal with a lot of the Flame Bolts, as of which nobody in YingYingYing has actually been hit by any Flame Bolts.
So the DK there, the Blood DK, of course, taking 2 stacks of the Arcane Missiles right there quite comfortably. Of course, you can use an interrupt on them, but also Blood Mirror is usually pretty good for that, although the risk of running Blood Mirror in some of these bigger, dangerous pulls, is sometimes going to be quite high, so DK is often timed to go for that, purge, just to be a bit on the safer side. We do see a lot of damage going out on the Az. They did kind of split some of the damage amongst the Guardian Images. Nothing too bad right now. It seems like the damage was handled quite well by the Resto Druid, and now we're back into the main phase, and we are expecting that Flame Wreath next.
Yep, and you're seeing the Warlock there did a great job just being able to get all his dots up. He wasn't really focusing on one in particular, and it really gave him just an excellent opportunity to be able to just get all the mobs, dotted up, get as much damage out as possible, and they really just clean up that phase just so well. And it also helped when they were able to desync the casts of the mobs, so the damage is not all coming out in one big pulse. It also helps that there's constant damage, that the HOTS aren't, topping everybody off, over healing, and then everybody gets dropped super low.
Of course, the Flame Wreath comes out now, so we're going to have to keep an eye on the DPS DK, and of course the Windwalker Monk ticking quite heavily from that Flame Wreath. Should one of those explode, or somebody crosses the barrier of one of those Flame Wreaths, we're going to have a devastating explosion on the group, wiping the party immediately on the spot. In the meantime, of course, Shepi on the right-hand side, now just dealing with the Guardian Image phase.
Yeah, and you're seeing, that's one of the biggest things when you're looking at, Flame Wreaths is, the kind of panic that can sort of set in when you're seeing, for example, your Blood DK taking huge amounts of damage from the piercing missiles. And it's always a big thing of having that faith, having that trust in, your tank, having the faith in your group to be able to deal with that. And now, again, you're entering the Ceaseless Winter phase, so the tank, thankfully, is getting most of these Flame Bolt hits a lot of times, so it makes it so much easier when you're able to just have them tunneling into the tank is able to heal himself. Makes it so much easier.
Indeed, and they're down Shepi with relative ease, so they'll be falling down the rabbit hole, of course, to eternity. It'll take quite a while. We do know that fall takes almost a minute or two, something like that. Shepi now on 42% for Shepi's side in the meantime. Now, I didn't keep an eye. Did they deal with their Flame Wreath phase?
They are about to.
I think they're about to.
Yep, they dealt with other Guardians, so the Flame Wreath should be the next cast, I believe, after this Flame Bolt coming up here in just a second. So, you know, they have the focus there, and again, you know, one of the nicest things about Tyrannical, you take Beacon of Faith as a paladin, you're able to get, for example, your beacons up on that Demon Hunter and on that Warlock, and makes it so much easier, and also just huge.
But does the Warlock really need it?
Does the Warlock need it? I mean, the Warlock doesn't need anybody.
Exactly, true. So some of these players probably did pick up, of course, some of the Quinn Rats along the way, making sure that they can ride them along for the Mana Worm boss coming up, you know, making sure that you can cast while moving and increasing that movement speed, for instance, for the Blood DK or for the DPS DK as well, the Frost DK, making sure that they can collect some of those orbs faster by pre-AMSing and ignoring the debuff that it puts on them.
Yep, and you're seeing Ceaseless Winter entering here for the Medivh. They actually had a fantastic kill time, Team Shepi, but they really have a lot of room to catch up. They do need to go down the rabbit hole, which we've said is quite a fall, seeing if they have any of the extra Quinn Rats that are available to them. And it's interesting to see the Warlock who's taking advantage of one of the Rats. I guess just he's able to have the mobile casting open up and available to him. But we do have plenty of immunities on the side of YingYingYing to be able to deal with any and all, really, of the orbs that are spawning.
So, of course, for those at home, there are a couple of notable mechanics on this boss that we have to watch out for. The most important one, of course, being when the Mana Devourer expels orbs and tries to reabsorb them. If the players don't intercept enough of these orbs, the Mana Devourer will reach 100% energy or mana and explode and essentially kill everybody in the group. So it's really important. And the reason they pulled it to the corner is because you cut off 180 degrees, essentially, of where those orbs can spawn, and you filter a lot of the orbs on top of the boss, as you can see right in the middle of that hitbox, which is where that DK is going to pre-AMS and jump up and down, making sure that they absorb as many of those. Now, if you do manage to absorb some of these orbs without pre-immuning, you will get a stack that you need to cleanse by heading into one of those swirling void zones on the ground, which is a ton of damage, Jack.
There's a ton of ticking damage that you have to deal with, and while it does offer a little bit of a damage buff, as you're seeing, for example, the Windwalker picking up one of them, you know, any attempts to really clear it out just puts so much stress on you, the healer, and potentially as you get into higher and higher keys can just be one-shotting you if you don't have any defenses up and available.
So they're doing a good job here. They're going on the second round now. I mean, they have enough to handle this. Should be no problem, but especially between the two DKs. As long as they're pre-AMSing properly, we do see that same AMS go down. Of course, the orbs being cleaned up properly in the end. Surprised to see that they didn't pull an extra rat along with this boss. Oftentimes teams do, especially to try and reset some of their CDs or build some resources. Nonetheless, we do see Shepi now pulling the boss as well, just starting on 95% in the meantime, but they're just kind of falling slightly more and more behind as the map goes on. Of course, they do have that beneficial to-death differential in their favor, so they have an extra kind of 10 seconds to make up for it, but they're well beyond 10 seconds behind.
Well, the interesting thing we're talking about falling behind is just how low the Windwalker is dropping here because he did take an extra stack of the dot. You know, it was one thing when you're saying, I'm going to expend extra healer time there. I'm going to, you know, just keep on healing the Windwalker through that extra damage. But it's another thing entirely when they start taking additional stacks, trying to pump out, maybe being a little bit too greedy, or maybe it was an accident there. They're trying to pump out that extra damage there. But it's a very, very quick battle res. I'd love to see that. You know, you want to make sure that you're being aggressive. But they do get the full
DK's
mana.
Gonna try to finish this off for 4%. I think it's worth at this point, obviously. If the boss was any higher, the DK should just kind of, you know, finish it off. But there's a very limited amount of time. The DK has picked up 3 stacks. We do know that these stacks give you 5% increased damage. The DK is going to have to absorb a ton of these with pre-AMS to make sure he survives. Unfortunately, they go down, and YingYingYing is going to have a full wipe over on
3%.
Mana Devourer at 3%. That's devastating. They're going to have to run back all the way from the top of those large books, and in the meantime, ever so slowly, Shepi is now pulled ahead at 34%.
Now, this really is the opportunity for Shepi to catch up. This is the opportunity that they've really been looking for, to be able to get, you know, the safer run, just a cleaner run. You are seeing, of course, that Shepi is also wiping, also reaching 100% mana.
Okay, I mean, the Blood DK is not going to be able to solo this. They should just cut their losses, get the wipe over with. I'm not sure exactly why he's trying to extend this pull. Just running, there we go, finally running in the zone, calling the wipe. And you know what, Jack, we're right back to square one. Right back to square one. So as you can see, YingYingYing again pulling the boss to the corner and getting ready for that first round of mana orbs.
Yeah, and you're seeing both teams going down hard here. Second try coming up for YingYingYing. You know, it may have just been something, you know, where the positioning was just a little bit off, where some of the orbs were kind of more orbs were getting into the boss than necessary. So it may have just been a positioning issue on the side of the tank. They're so close, 3%.
I mean, YingYingYing, hello, who's there? It's Mana Devourer. Now, we will have to deal once again with the orbs, but you know, between the two DKs, they have an almost perfect rotation of absorbing every wave. AMS lines up every other, maybe off by about 2 or 3 seconds, so if somebody's lending a hand, especially the DK, especially the Warlock with some of those orbs, the rest of them can usually be absorbed by the time they're able to kill this boss off with the amount of DPS they have, already down to half HP right now. In the meantime, Shepi, of course, working on their Mana Devourer back at 80%.
No, it's just insane to think about. It was also with that battle res that went out on the monk as well, where, you know, maybe if that was delayed, maybe if that was, you know, after they got absolutely annihilated, they would be able to push through the couple extra percents. But again, it's anybody's game now. Each team having that full wipe, it is anybody's game. I mean, yeah, we still have that 3-death differential. You know, there's a couple of notable things. I mean, well, neither team has that battle res right now. We do see the Warlock over on YingYingYing's side holding on to that unstable debuff, opting to get that 5% extra damage going on at the cost of course, some dot on them. But it's a Warlock. They'll be able to survive, no problem. In the meantime, Mana Devourer just now hitting 50% for Shepi on the right side of the screen. Now, the boss has been pulled away from the corner of the room, making the orbs just a bit harder to absorb, as we do know, Jack. But they seem to be doing quite a good job, and as you can see, the Paladin popped their bubble there and riding around on that little Quinn Rat managed to absorb most of those orbs. Yeah, and just the mobility that you're really able to, you know, get onto your Paladin. Of course, it will end up wiping out poor little Quinn Rat there, so we will only be able to take advantage of that once. But once should be all that they need, and they're just seeing YingYingYing 2%, I think 1%. Oh, we do have a death pop up the last second. Purgatory popped. Okay. They got it. They managed to pull it off, so another death there. Good. I mean, they didn't have the choice with the battle res, but luckily it was just enough. Of course, we do know we checkpoint here, and now that the Mana Devourer is dead, the players regrow to their proper size. Of course, these books not quite so large and intimidating, and we know we can't read, so they do pull around the side. Now, there are a total of 15 mini Mana Devourers here, or actually regular Mana Devourers, but you know, the players are max size again. Now, this is a sketchy pull, right? It's important to do this pull, but the problem is there's a lot of maintenance needed with these orbs that are spawning. Yeah, you're seeing so many explosive orbs going off there that they basically just had to muscle through. And the crazy part of just making sure you're able to soak up any extra mana or deal with the explosives, deal really with the AoE damage. It's just showing how much stress you're going to be putting on the healer. As again, one of the DPS is going down, more DPS is going down, tank is down, and just a full wipe again on the side of YingYingYing.
An explosive performance from the Fel Explosives themselves, wiping out YingYingYing completely. Luckily, they did just reach the checkpoint, obviously right after killing Mana Devourer, so they're able to release and try that pull again should they choose to do it. We'll have to see if Shepi decides to follow suit and pull all 15. Now, a beautiful cutscene here. Never seen this one before, but let's focus once again on YingYingYing as they kind of run down the hall in the meantime. Did they opt to skip in the end?
And well, they got most of the mobs down.
Okay, so they opted to skip the ones that reset on the other side. So they might have to make a couple of % up in the meantime, but we're seeing the same similar big pull over on Shepi's side. We've already had the Purg proc for their Blood DK, who does go down now in the end. The Holy Paladin at half health. Immediately the Blood DK releases, but they're in a safe position now. They've done what they need to do. They only had one death, and they're moving forward to the Bridge of Doom.
That's right. And, you know, YingYingYing opting again to get, they're at that 89% point again. All they need to do is get 2 more bats taken care of along with the chess event here. So, you know, they do end up invising past the Pyromancer, not even worrying about dealing with it. And you're probably going to see something coming out very, very similar out of Team Shepi, but they do need a couple extra % there. So looking to actually just take on the Mighty Smash, you know, taking it on and getting that extra %, and then they'll probably be skipping the Pyromancer.
You know, you do have about 6-7% from chess itself, but it's not uncommon that teams will kill the chess event, and then during the RP to open up the rest of the chess bridge leading up to Vizdoom, players will backtrack and kill some of those Fel Bats floating in the air, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. But of course, the main focus of the chess event here is every time you kill a piece, you actually stun the king and get rid of his invulnerability shell, allowing him to take damage. Once he reaches that 30% threshold, he will not regain that invulnerability shell, and he will be able to just tank and spank him until he dies and then checkmate.
I mean, you're right, as you're seeing that raging effect being applied to the king, that is of course that point of no return. They will not be getting that extra immunity shield, and they are just absolutely burning him down here. So what you'll be seeing is just the rest of Druid running ahead while everyone else deals with that extra 3% that they need to get. Actually, the Warlock's going ahead.
Yeah, he's just hanging out. He's just hanging out. So we can see the Warlock is going ahead, casting that Demonic Gateway for the players on their return. Meanwhile, they kind of turn around, as we alluded to, go to the bats. The way to get these bats down is they need to be taunted or, of course, gripped down. And once they do that, they will land, and all the players will have access to DPSing them. But you have to be careful with that frontal breath. It does do quite a bit of damage.
Yeah, but it does quite a bit of damage. They need to just make sure that they have that positioning down pat, and really getting them down to the ground first, so you're not actually having them kind of breathing on top of you, but also breathing down, like on the Z axis or anything like that. So they get them down very quickly, very easily, making sure the gates are getting opened. And again, we've seen these leads get scuffed in the past, especially in the previous MDI with some of the wipes on Vizdoom. So again, playing safely, YingYingYing has the advantage for now, but there is still that very big death differential of 7 deaths that could easily just make all the difference.
Yikes. That could turn out pretty badly. 35-second differential. YingYingYing is indeed ahead a bit. Now we do come to our resident eyeball boss, Vizdoom. Always, I like to say keep an eye on things, but they do pull in 3 phases to this boss, of course, at 66% and 33%. He will port to a ship, followed by another type of ship at 33%. Now, notable mechanics here that we do have to watch out for, of course, is that kind of fell beam you see on the side. Players will need to kite that away, make sure they don't kite it into other players, which is what they're doing right now. And of course, he does have that huge frontal that will punt you off of the platform. Here it is, the disintegrate right now. Got to be careful for that. Safe here because there's no ledge to be punted off of, although it does hit quite hard, but in the later ships, you can actually get knocked off the ships. Finally, of course, Jack is, you know, a very healer-centric mechanic, are those Chaos Orbs and debuff that spawn on a player. It's
very, very important to make sure when any of the Chaos Orbs are actually affecting a player, they run outside of the group, they stand still, get the dispel, and then they're able to once again move. You know, if you're ever dispelling somebody who's just running around, moving in the process, very, very high chance of dispelling them and then them running into their own balls and just killing themselves right.
I hate running into my own balls. Indeed, it is horrible. Now, moving up to the second ship, we see YingYingYing in the meantime. So now, casting down the length of this ship will be those disintegrates. They will punt you. Now, you have to also avoid those kind of static fell towers on the side. They pulse for an immense amount of damage. You kind of have to, oh, Warlock does nail one to the face there. Luckily, no death. Once you reach the boss, he will kind of resume his normal abilities. And it is notable, Jack, that on the second and then, of course, third ship, you increase the amount of those Chaos Orb debuffs by 1 every time, making it harder and harder to find space. And on this platform, we're going to also see, of course, well, much like the first platform too, those green swirlies that do a ton of damage and really limit your real estate.
Yeah, that's right. And the artillery strikes that come down from the ship, you know, ideally you ever want to get into any scenarios, you're just be able to slowly kind of kite out, slowly start, you know, moving away from these guys, but because they also have a very, very long delay before they actually go out. But you are seeing the healer going down with the death going on there. Maybe have ran into a Chaos Orb, and another one going down to the Annihilate.
They do have the res, though. They get the res up on the rest of Druid. No res is remaining anymore, so they're going to have to try and 4-man the rest of this. They already have that 35-second differential, now increased to 45 seconds because of those 2 deaths. They warp over to the third ship. In the meantime, Shepi now reaching the second ship, needing to deal with that. They have the full strength of their 5-man roster here, plus that 45 seconds benefit for them.
It looks like that, and that's just going to be the big thing that they're really needing here, is just playing as safely as possible, trying to do whatever they can to make up for it, because there's still going to be huge, huge damage going out on the party here, and you know, it's going to be adding even more damage that the Blood DK will have to be dealing with, and the group will have to be watching out for. So this isn't in the bag for YingYingYing yet.
Not yet, but it's going to be close. I mean, you know, if they hold together, YingYingYing can finish the rest of this map. Those sentries do need to be killed within some due time because they get a pretty nasty stack on the tank that not only slows you, but does a ton of fire damage. They do manage to get those down well, but here we go in a second, Jack. We're going to see that triple orb debuff. Really important that one of those players get dispelled right away, which is what we see, and that allows more space for the second players to go off. We do see the dispel, of course, with that AMS from the Frost DK getting rid of it himself. Tank finally drops his, and everybody's quite safe. Vizdoom now at 8%. In the meantime, of course, Shepi now approaching the third platform.
It was very, very scary seeing the AMS going off from the Frost DK. I don't think the Monk had actually saw it until it was just right on top of him there. But from here, just making sure you're dodging the Annihilates, making sure you're keeping track of, you know, everything that's going on here. Just not having another 2% wipe here. And of course, YingYingYing
right, so they're done.
Finishing out the game.
We have a 45-second timer now. If Shepi makes this within 45 seconds, they're actually the winners of this map. So it's all eyes on Shepi at the moment. We'll just have to see. They're going to get their first round of the Chaos debuffs. I believe they haven't had it yet, but I mean, they're well DPSing this. They should have no problem cleaning it up unless something just absolutely horrible happens here at the end. They would be doomed if that does happen indeed. But it looks like they managed to crank the boss damage. No problem. They handle the Chaos Orbs prior to this well. There's the debuff right now again, and they should manage to clinch this and get that win.
Should be managing to muscle through this again by just a couple of seconds, just by 10 seconds. And it's those extra deaths, just those extra deaths, the extra risks, and that was basically just the...
Those were actually the 2 deaths?
Yeah.
those were the 2 deaths on that map, on that boss.
That was actually crazy down to the wire there for our first map in this series. And keep in mind, guys, an elimination match. Going to say it a few more times probably on this desk before we even do jump into break. But it is a lot on the line here between these 2 teams, and they look to be very evenly matched. And Jack, one of the big things that jumps out to me when we think about what we just saw is the fact that Man Devour almost devoured both of these squads.
It's so dangerous, and I'm not quite sure what went wrong when they were just not able to get enough orb soaks. I mean, they had the proper setup, they had all the tools that they needed required for them, but just somewhere along the way, they just kind of got lost in translation of what they needed to be soaking up, and just a little bit here, a little bit there, the energy gets too high and just absolutely obliterates their group.
Now, this is the last series of the night, and then we'll be back tomorrow to actually settle the score and figure out the 2 best teams in China, and also for a little bit of that extra prize pool, we're going to figure out who the #1 team is as well. But for today, with these 2 teams, Shepi versus YingYingYing, we have a big difference between the healers that they are bringing in, Jack, as we actually do jump into the next key. Basically how it works out is the losing team is then able to pick the next dungeon that we're actually going to see. Do you think that that healer can be one of the keys to finding a weakness for your opponent?
Keys to finding a counter, when you're running with Resto Druid, when you're running with Holy Pally, they're generally attributed to be the most well-rounded healers that you really have at your disposal. So I don't think that they're really going to be targeting the healers too much. And we've also seen a number of times where other teams have targeted the healers and said, oh, maybe the Disc Priest is going to be a weak point. We'll take Grievous on Court of Stars and we'll see if we can burn him there. And it really didn't work out for them. So I think it's going to be more focused on how cleanly, for example, Shepi or YingYingYing is actually going to be able to play here, much more so than actually having to focus on the healers and try to burn the healers.
Cool. Yeah. So we just won't talk about healers anymore. We're only going to talk about DPS, and we're going to do that when we return from this quick break, ladies and gentlemen. I need you right now to close your eyes. I need you to think about what exactly is going on. One of these teams will be sent home. One will continue to fight on for the China region, for that prize pool. Are your eyes closed right now? They better be. I'd be very upset if you're not listening to me. Do not open those eyes up until we return. Open up those peepers. It's time to jump into the next one. My name is Rich. I'm going to be your host, and I'm joined by Salute and Jack. guys, we know the next key. It can be decided here as well. We're headed to the thicket. Now, Jack, let's talk about what affixes we can expect to see.
You're going to be seeing the Tyrannical, Explosive. I believe they picked Sanguine to go along with it here. So it's going to be very, very important just to, the movement of the mobs, making sure, because there's a lot of the different mobs that actually have, varying health pools that they have to be focusing down. So really just the focus is going to be the biggest thing. Everyone's running Blood DKs. You're going to be able to have all the grips and stuff like that. For YingYingYing, I believe you're going to be able to have the Frost DK as well. So you're going to be able to have the additional grip there. So just more ad control, more focus on just making those clean pulls, avoiding the cats at all costs.
Hey, the other thing that I want to bring up is the fact that we have seen Sanguine be the pick quite a few times, Salute.
Kind of weird, but some of the affixes you choose to kind of throw the other team for a loop would be things like explosives. But I mean, both healers are geared well to deal with explosives here. We have Blood DKs that could deal well with them. So I mean, at this point, I don't think you can really, between these two teams at least, can't really curveball the other team too much, especially in Darkheart Thicket, which is a pretty popular dungeon on live. So might as well just do something regular.
Jack, is this kind of, I feel like this is almost like a hug affix, right? This is one of those affixes where you're just kind of going, okay, I don't want to screw over my own team. We're just going to go in here. We're going to try to play our game the best and just try to complete this dungeon fast.
Well, that's simply what it is. When you're saying that we're the best team, we're going to show it to you, and we're not even going to have to use any kind of cheesy affixes or anything like that. Or we're not even going to put ourselves in a difficult situation or test any niche affix combinations. We're just going to play straight up better.
All right, but let's see if YingYingYing can play straight up better, because they have to do it here to extend the series. If they aren't able to do it, we will see them sent home from the tournament. Does Shepi have what it takes to create that hot 2-0 action in the Darkheart Thicket?
All right, we're about to get into the thicket of things here, Jack. Now, I did want to say just a moment there, we mentioned the explosive and a necrotic and some of those nastier affixes that I don't choose. I mean, we do have default explosive here, so there's already kind of a bit of babysitting and nastiness going on. They don't want to make it even worse for themselves, by picking a necrotic on top of it.
Yeah, and you're seeing there, like you said, you already have something to deal with. You feel like you're already stronger on this instance. This instance is always going to come with explosives, so you already have, that the big affix really to practice with. And again, you're seeing just early deaths coming out here by Shepi. YingYingYing is just
the problem really is with those Nightclaws. I mean, cat's out of the bag with them. They just keep jumping on the distant target. They smack them right away. And who else is going to take that damage, right? Holy Paladin's marked as melee in this case, so the DK tipping quite low there. Poor Warlock dies a couple times, comes back in nonetheless, and they're going to move on now, of course, to that first bear.
If anything, I think it's kind of disappointing the ability of the Paladin really just to prepare for that damage. Like you said, who else is it going to be jumping on? So you should be able to have a Blessing of Protection. You should be able to have Aura Mastery, Blessing of Sacrifice. You have all these different tools that should be just immediately drilled into the Warlock with the knowledge that, hey, you're going to be the focus, I'm going to protect you.
Yeah, I'm surprised that we didn't see any of those. So we do have, of course, the two Ruiners getting kind of aggroed on the side while Shepi, is dealing with this Grizzly pull here in the meantime. Now, the Ruiners can be dangerous if you don't handle them very well. They do cast on the tank for Ruination, which is decrease the amount of healing done, but also that Star Shower is really dangerous, and if you don't interrupt it and you get hit by one of the small void zones, as we just saw right there, it's easy death going all around right now. So we're going to have that extra 5-second timer, of course. We do have that shout from the bear going out, the Maddening Roar, which increases in damage for every successive shout, so it's very important to kill those bears early. Now, they did opt to kind of pull that extra trash pack on the side that we see a lot of teams usually walk by.
And just, like you said, emphasizing, the deaths there. The last game was decided by just 2 deaths at the very, very end here, and just little things here that are just adding up, and the way that they're pulling, the aggression that they're seeing, how long these bears have been up. It's wild.
Yeah, no, indeed it is. So we do see a pretty typical pull here, of course, coming from YingYingYing, where the tank will often pull both bears to the side while the rest of the group safely runs to the side, which otherwise would lead to a rather grisly situation, of course. Now, the first boss here, we do have Gladalis coming up. We're in a tyrannical setting, so some of these bosses will be more dangerous. Jack, one of the main things to watch out for on this boss is which is the furthest target for the boss that deals with the cat leap for that grievous bleed.
Yeah, and you're seeing right there, of course, they're having the rest of Druid standing out there, and ideally, if you're going to make sure you're staying out there at all times, you're going to still be focusing damage, being able to go into Guardian Affinity just to play on the extra safe side, being able to take advantage of Lady of the Child, Fury of Nature, getting out a lot of extra arcane damage, putting out those big Moonfire damage. So you're seeing, again, the rest of Druid pumping up huge amounts of damage, even as he's just going to sit in bear form, make sure he's extra safe for those cat jumps.
So, of course, the other animal counterpart to the Archdruid here is indeed the bear form that he will do every 2 cat forms. Important for the tank positioning here, as the tank can have their back to a wall and therefore not get punted across the map, but also the bear will charge into that wall. They don't do a very good job of it there. You can have your back to virtually anything in this room if you do it successfully, and it will cancel that bear form immediately, allowing the boss to pretty much be immobile during for that duration, and, you know, maximizing DPS for that run through.
Yeah, but both healers here are extremely well suited to be dealing with the damage from Lady Alice's jump. But the big thing always we gotta watch out for is when the nightmares are falling on top of the players right as you're getting into the leap. So it's a really cool positioning that you're seeing on the fact that the rest of Druid for YingYingYing, making sure he's getting that quick sidestep right before it happens, not taking any kind of damage from the nightmare. He's at full HP, he's got full armor, and he's got, you know, frenzied regen active to quickly top himself off, and then he's able to go back, stay in bear form, pump out some more moonfires, take advantage of those excellent.
Right, sure, and we do see some of those banishes coming up from the Warlock on YingYingYing's side, presumably to proc that Cephas during the boss fight. Smart move by them. In the meantime, of course, Shepi just now moving down towards Gladalis' area. Now, they are a substantial amount of trash ahead. They're 16% ahead, but they have 2 extra deaths at the moment, and, you know, they still have to deal with Gladalis, which is a fairly long fight, especially in this tyrannical setting. In the meantime, YingYingYing just about cleaning up the boss here, and they'll be able to start moving on to the Dryads and the Flowers coming up.
And the level that Shepi's been playing in terms of the aggressiveness of their pulls and, you know, the risks that they're taking, you know, they haven't even hit the first checkpoint yet, right? But it's something that, you know, if they're having any other kind of extra deaths, you know, it's just something that they always have to be running back, starting fresh.
First and only checkpoint.
And the only checkpoint, that's right. That's exactly right. So that's something to always consider going forward, you know, when we're looking at if they're going to be skipping anything, if they're going to be trying to maneuver past anything, you know, if they keep up this level of aggression, it's really going to be burning them in the long run.
So, of course, some of these packs, not too dangerous innately, but these Blossoms do spawn a lot of AoE denial on the ground that you'll have to move out of. And, of course, we do have those Dryads, which are actually cousins of the Wet Ads. But in the meantime, the irritating thing about them is that they will run off from the pack, but luckily they do have DK. Actually, you only really need 1 DK, but they do have the double DK, which you can grip back in, but obviously you don't want to because they are fairly immobile, so you don't want to do it when the Flowers are about to die because you'll grip it right into the Sanguine and they'll just sit there and get healed the whole time.
Yeah, it's a great thing that you're having the instincts there where you're just talking about it, where there's, you know, they were kind of leaving them there and it was kind of saying, oh, well, what's going on there? But again, they had the dots up, but it's interesting to see they're pulling the Dryad and the Keeper because they've already cleared out all the Flowers. Of course, the Keeper will be, of course, healing any of those Flowers. It's very, very important to kind of get them separated. That way, when you just deal with it by itself, they just absolutely melt.
Now, like I said, typically, Jack, you and I are used to seeing this pack skipped, but because they skipped so much of that first trash with the Cats, they opted to pull this first Keeper pack, and we'll see if they opt to do the double Keeper pack along with that Patrol of the Flower and the 1 Dryad too. We'll have to keep an eye on that in just a moment. It's not too dangerous of a pack, but it does take a while. Sanguine is a pain in the butt for it, and if you don't kill it quick enough, you're going to get overwhelmed by those mushrooms that do a ton of damage. I mean, a DK can safely run over them with some Vamp Blood and AMS as well, but the explosion radius is larger than its graphics, so the melee will have to be very careful as not to get one shot. In the meantime, of course, over on Shepi's side, they are still chiseling away at Gladalis, still moving pretty slow, even though they are ahead on trash. I mean, I do believe they're moving a bit slower on that boss damage than YingYingYing did in the first place.
Yeah, and you're seeing one of the interesting things, you know, Holy Paladin versus Rested Druid in this situation is the Holy Paladin, you know, ideally you're trying to focus as much as possible on staying in melee. You're going to be taking something like Crusader's Might. That way your Crusader Treks are giving you more Holy Shocks, more Light of Dawns. But you don't really have that opportunity when you're standing out at range, when you're baiting out any of the jumps. So it really puts it, you know, a big favor as you're seeing in having a Rested Druid where you're able to gear your legendaries, taking non-Rested Druid legendaries to be able to take advantage of very, very huge damage there. And again, that's probably why it's taking so much longer for Shepi to get it down.
So we are indeed actually seeing the skip from with the second, or the 2 Keeper pack, excuse me. Well, the tank will pull it off to this. Actually, it was the healer that pulled it off to the side. And in the meantime, we're going to have what seems to be a really sizable pull, or I think they're going to a no-no spot up there. But in the meantime, they will pull a lot of them around the corner here, making sure they LOS those orbs. No, everything's fine. They're making sure they're LOSing those orbs. I thought they were trying to jump up the cliff there, but I know they eliminated that a while ago.
That's right.
So they're LOSing the orbs, well to do so. In the meantime, of course, the Druid can release safely from their checkpoint. We do have a death going down, unfortunately, right there. So that'll be another 5 seconds. But the Druid can safely release and stealth back really quickly through the pack that they just skipped with the Keepers. While in the meantime, of course, the DK can very easily keep themselves healthy.
Yeah, but you're talking about the area denial. Whenever you're just focusing all your mobs into one singular location, having that aerial denial ahead of you can just be such a pain, especially when you're running so many heavy melee comps like we've seen this entire day.
So we finally just get the res in now on the Windwalker Monk. Of course, they had to wait for that res. They couldn't get back without having to either invis pod or having to pull the trash to the side or have to kill it. So now that we're back, we have to kill these 5 GUIs, of course, these dwellers, prior to having access to the second boss, Oakheart, in this dungeon.
Yeah, and you're seeing, you know, as it's rotating through these arcane torrents, you know, the Blood Elf is just so useful here. Being able to make sure you're having those AoE silences coming out and getting it down very rapidly and engaging with Sloot's favorite boss.
I love Oakheart. He's a good friend of mine. He's got a lot of junk in that trunk. Now, it's important, some of the notable things on this boss. He has a frontal breath. Tank needs to turn him away. We see it right there, of course. But the biggest thing, the most dangerous thing, I would say, well, there's 2 dangerous things here. One is that what we just saw, huge damage on the group. Every other one can be countered with consumption from the DK because it happens every 30 seconds. Consumption, of course, having that 45-second CD. But also, Jack, we need to watch out for that huge crushing grip on the tank that does a ton of damage. Now, Blood DK is well suited for that, of course, with the Vamp Blood and AMS combo. With Red Thirst, they can likely Vamp Blood every single one if they have enough haste and if they're death striking enough.
Yep, and as you're seeing, they're very tightly stacked in together, which makes it much easier to deal with what is usually just more of an annoying mechanic. The roots are going to be spawning up there and basically just snaring in the group, or if you just stand out of the snares like you would like to do, you do spawn up a bunch of adds. You're seeing the Druid jumping in there and making sure he's in bear form, that way he's able to cover the root. He then shifts out of bear form, clearing all those roots all at once. Paladin can do the exact same thing, which is putting Blessed Freedom on whomever, running over all of them, but it really helps if you're able to have everything stacked up together so the Druid only has to shift out of it once.
And then there are often some strategies that call to leave those roots alive in order for some DPS to gain some extra single target by either multi-dotting, what have you. But in this case, they're trying to keep it safe by making sure they don't have too many adds running around, is not to deal with too many fell explosives in the meantime, and just focusing all their damage on Oakheart and having to deal with minimal orb spawn, only one at a time from the boss.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, when you're having different options like that, but you're also seeing the tank going down for Shepi. I believe they're just getting their skip taken care of, so they're just allowing their tank to die instead of their healer because their healer doesn't have that option. But the healer is going down here.
They go down like brothers, and unfortunately, both of them will die. There is no option to res either one of them unless they opt to use that soul stone in the meantime, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. And of course, it is a holy paladin, so they're not going to be able to stealth back.
Well, they do have that failure detection pylon that they're able to rely on. It's just a little...
Oh, yep, I see them get up, yep.
The engineering ability, that way they're able to just get it at res at literally 1% and next to no mana, so it's a very nice failsafe there. I believe the paladin must have had some kind of dot or some kind of damage. I don't believe he aggroed anything in particular, so it was great that they were able to get that done. And you see, of course, the Demon Hunter did put the trap on the Dryad there. That way you're able to stop the patrol from coming upstairs, gave them the breathing room that they really needed.
Now, there's that one explosive orb that they just left in the background there. Hopefully it won't do too much to them in the meantime. Of course, Oakheart now just going below 10% HP for YingYingYing here in the meantime. Pretty clean kill overall from them. No worries, no deaths, nothing in that sense. They handled it very well. Dealt with the roots the whole time, as we discussed. No problems for the healer healing up that AoE stomp in the meantime. And Shepi just now finally getting down to that GUI area as they deal with those last 2 flowers prior to pulling that big group.
You're seeing a very big deficit here for Team Shepi, as they have a huge deficit of just 20 seconds, while they're also dealing with all the trash that's still left ahead of them and the boss. So YingYingYing just pulling up ahead so quick. But keep in mind, this is the exact same scenario that we saw in Upper Karazhan. They really have to, clear through this trash, make sure they're sticking to their fundamentals, and just really taking on Karazhan as cleanly as possible.
Did you say deficit?
I learn.
Now, the Blood-Tainted Fury here, it will split into 4 lesser water elementals, or I suppose Blood Fury elementals. Now, you can skip these by stunning or rooting the mob, what have you, and letting the range finish it off in the meantime. That way, you don't have to deal with them. Of course, they don't give any percent, as we see here. Oftentimes, now, not that the group is planning for it, not that any group's plan for it, but oftentimes, you do want to pull that elemental to the side of the road and kill it there, so that if something does go bad, you can get back on path and not have to deal with these 4 elementals. But hopefully they don't come to that in the meantime. Now, we do see the Windwalker and, of course, the Frosty get dipping quite low there. No problem in the end. Good root on that second Fury. We don't usually pull that. Root it off to the side and opens way for Karazhan, the 3rd boss. In the meantime, of course, Shepi now pulling Oakheart.
Yeah, but just, again, right as they're engaging with the first boss, or the 3rd boss, you're seeing Shepi engaging with the 2nd. It's just the lead just continues to snowball here. They're getting a couple of the little whelplings down before the boss, just building up resources here right as they're about to engage here.
So we do get, of course, that Warlock portal down, which is oftentimes where they will pull Karazhan to make sure that the casters can take that Warlock portal back towards Karazhan. Of course, the winds on Karazhan will push you faster the further you are away from the center of the hitbox, so it's important to get right in that hitbox. But no one also also to bait for that cave-in, and of course the third ability on this fight that usually the tank has to watch out for is that frontal breath. However, is that if the tank is out of range, let's say to grab some whelps as we're seeing here right now, that frontal breath will actually target the next highest threat within melee range. You
know, just great presence of mind, waiting for the breath before they're pulling any of the little extra whelps. And again, you're seeing a pretty early tranquility going out there. I really like being able to see that. You know, you want to be able to, focus as much as you can on the pull, dishing out some extra damage. So just focusing and just allowing your tranquility to be your big healing, rather than setting up rejuves on everybody, rather than, casting the wild growth when you need to. Any of the extra abilities that are going to take up a lot more time, you're getting a little bit better burst off the pull there, and I really like that move there.
And good bear form while he baited that cave-in now, just to make sure he had that extra survivability. Now, usually it works most of the time in a set rotation on this boss. Once it's set and we have that kind of, the pushback mechanic, now we'll have the cave-in after this, then the breath, rinse, repeat. Sometimes the boss doesn't follow suit, so there's a bit of randomization in terms of the ability queue, but here they have a pretty standard set one in the meantime. Now, the upside, of course, of pulling the whelps is increased single target for some of these classes. However, the downside, of course, is that we now have to babysit some of these orbs a bit faster.
That's exactly right, but it does come in handy when whenever you're able to have the consumption buff going out as the knockback is going there. It's a lot of extra healing that everybody is able to do this for themselves, and it puts even less pressure on the healer, because one of the biggest things here is you need to be able to get everybody topped off before the roar comes out, because it's going to drop people so low. So it's just an internal timer that you have in your head. You have to say, everyone's taking damage, everyone's getting pushed back. I need to be able to get as much healing out as possible when I'm not even able to stand still and cast before the next big mechanic happens.
You're right, and I'm sure they've well communicated ahead of time how they're going to fill the gaps on those wind pushbacks right now with this downdraft. You can consumption every other one. Of course, this downdraft happens every 30 seconds. Once again, consumption being a 45-second CD, so they'll want to cover every other one. In the meantime, Oakheart just now falling for Team Shepi. Yeah, they are falling further and further behind, unfortunately. 25-second death deficit between them, and really no huge advantage from a trash perspective to speak of at the moment.
Yeah, and you're seeing, YingYingYing, for example, like you were talking about, really did skip a lot of trash, and they really made it up very, very rapidly when they were able to get, for example, that keeper, and they were able to isolate a lot of the flowers away from them, so they really were wasting no time at all, and as they're getting a very, very clean kill here on Karazhan now that we're about at 8%.
So Karazhan about to fall indeed for YingYingYing, after which they'll head into that hollowed out log leading up to Shade of Xavius, which is, notoriously one of the more scary bosses, especially with Tyrannical. Yeah. One of the most, not most, but one of the more scary bosses with some of the abilities on Tyrannical, so players will have to be well heads up on that to make sure that they don't get one shot, especially should he absorb any of the swirlies, which we'll discuss when we get there. But now, some of this trash in the meantime is particularly dangerous. Of course, with these red fire imps, we have to watch out for the Dread Inferno. If casts like that go off, they're a huge area denial and can nuke a fair amount of players if they're caught within that swirly range.
Yeah, one of the big things is also going to be the curse that's going out that needs just to be dispelled. It's also one of the nice things about it is, for example, if you're a paladin, you're not able to dispel it. You are able to use Blessing of Freedom to be able to negate the effect. The Druid, of course, can just shift out of it because it acts as a slow and as just the extra haste debuff.
The Druid themselves can also just decurse it, which is an advantage if I'm not mistaken, right?
That's right. So the Druid's able to dispel it, the Paladin's able to use Freedom on it, and of course you can just shift if you're the Druid.
So of course they do opt to pull 2 packs here together. The Bloodseekers, the Bats, really just a ton of tank damage. There is a minor disease dot that will minorly heal the Bats as a leech, but most of the scary damage is the melee from them, and of course we have several casters in here as well. Looks like they have the damage under control. They time their CDs well, and this should boost them to 100%, after which I would expect to see a skip on the final scary trash crack prior to Xavius.
That's right, and they're at 100% trash. Unfortunately, the Druid is not able to dispel the disease that comes up from it, so it's very, very important to make sure you just tunneling those down, getting them down as rapidly as possible, because the threats of the tank can be very large. But again, thankfully, it's tyrannical, so they just melt very, very quickly, and they're able to get their invis pots off. They're able to get that 10-minute debuff applied so that they're not able to use any more potions, and get through the trash and get set up for Xavius.
But you know what? I mean, it's just for one boss. I mean, look, every pot counts for sure, but it's much more devastating using one of those invis pots at the beginning of a dungeon, being locked out for 10 minutes rather than just at the last boss here at the finish line for Shade of Xavius. In the meantime, Karazhan, of course, now at the 67% mark for Team Shepi. They're doing well. Similar strats, pulling some of the whelplings along on the side, but let's focus our attention here on Shade of Xavius. Lots to look out for, especially as a healer. Lots of nuke damage coming in from that Nightmare Bolt. There's a magic debuff to dispel. There's a huge channel dot you have to heal through. Let's walk through that, Jack.
That's right. So you have the Nightmare Bolt that's going out that will just be dealing a very huge lump sum amount of damage. It'll create a little radius around the player affected by it, and you need to stand with that player. They cannot stand alone. They need to stand with one other player, otherwise they're going to be pacified and silenced. You will then have the Feed on the Weak that goes out that deals constant ticking damage to the target. Huge damage for about 4 or 5 seconds. It requires so much single target healing onto them. And then you're also seeing the Unstable Paranoia, which is on the rest of Druid right now. If anybody stands in their zone, it deals damage to the affected player, and it fears them for about 5 or 6 seconds. So it puts a huge inconvenience on them, and they just run away to some random locations. The Feed on the Weak and the Nightmare Bolt and the Unstable Paranoia can target anybody in the group at any time.
Now, it is important to note that at 50%, Shade of Xavius will do a huge AoE nuke on the group and start up his second phase. Now, in the second phase, not too much changes. He has the same base abilities, but we will see a lot of swirlies falling from the sky, which not only damage players, but should one of them connect with Shade of Xavius' hitbox, which is larger than it seems, it will buff him for an increased percent damage done, leading up to 10 stacks, if I'm not mistaken, 5% per stack, which affects all of the abilities that you just discussed.
That's absolutely correct. And you're seeing there, I believe it was one of the cooldowns from the Warlock, was consumed when he got hit by the Nightmare Bolt. So it was very crucial that he was able to get, maybe a little bit extra CDs. Maybe he received, Iron Bark from the Druid there. And that way the Druid just bark skinned himself, went into bear form. Everyone else was able to use their immunities. Everybody else was able to use their big defensives here. And again, now at this point, you're just making sure you're focusing on protection. You're staying safe here. And again, the biggest threat here is going to be that Feed on the Weak, the huge damage that can pull it out. And you're not even sure, again, if it's going to be going out on the tank, dealing next to no damage, or if it's going to be going out on one of your most vulnerable DPS, much like the Frost DK.
And of course, we do know that the debuff from that Nightmare Bolt will pacify you for 20 seconds if nobody's helping you out in that little purple circle. The melee do well to rotate there while the Windwalker gets that Paranoia debuff, moves to the back of the boss, whilst in the meantime, the Frost DK joins the Blood DK at the front to make sure that the Blood DK can help with that pacification debuff. So good movement on their part there. It looks like they should probably have this one in the bag. I mean, it would take an absolute miracle at this point for YingYingYing to wipe, which would allow Shepi to then open up and try to sweep the series. But it looks like we're likely, Jack, headed for a Game 3.
That's right, going in for a Game 3 here, as you're seeing, and again, the rest of Druid kind of staying out of range, focusing on healing up. The Frost DK there is taking so much damage from that Feed on the Weak, where they are able to have just a little bit of extra healing that's going out, just this big focus, and just the Druid's just playing very safe, and I really like how YingYingYing was just giving the respect to this instance, giving the respect, for example, to the cats, and playing it so much cleaner than their opponents in Shepi.
Always got to respect the cats. And indeed, we do end up in a 1-1 in the series, and we'll be going to that Game 3.
That is the case. All tied up here. This is an elimination match as well, and that means that the next dungeon is the last dungeon we are going to see today, no matter what, and we are going to determine which team actually does get sent home. Now, not going to sugarcoat this. That was a little bit of a slaughter, right? In the end there, it ends up being somewhat of a slaughter. What caused that to actually happen in your mind, Jack?
I think it was a lot of the pacing that the group was having. Again, they're skipping the cats right off the pole, and they're making sure that the most lethal ads that they really have to be dealing with, they're skipping, they're bypassing, and they're not afraid to incur a couple deaths to be able to get some huge gains there. Most of the deaths on the side of YingYingYing were just them skipping trash packs, just them making sure that they're avoiding any risky situations, any situations that they're not comfortable with. And the more cleanly they played it, the more easily they were able to get through the instance there.
And that's the thing. As we go to this break, you got to keep that in mind. They cannot afford any mistakes here. Both of these teams are fighting for so much. YingYingYing versus Shepi. One will be sent home. The other will get to progress in the tournament no matter what. This is going to be the last dungeon that we see tonight, so do not go anywhere. Let's see the conclusion of day number 1 of the China MDI when we return. This is going to decide it, and you know what? It's going to end where it all began. We are headed back to Maw of Souls. And guys, this is also going to be a key that we're pretty familiar with, Jack.
Without a doubt. I mean, this has been the starter key all night long, making sure that we're able to, you know, this is the key that everyone should be practiced on, and as a result, this really should be the ace in their hole. This should be the one that they say, we can close this out as Team Shepi. We are going to just dominate.
Well, now, why do you think? Yeah, I actually am going to somewhat disagree with you, Sloot. Go ahead and take this away, because I think we're on the same wavelength here.
I mean, this is map 1. Everybody's training for this their entire lives.
Isn't that just going to say they were confident? They're saying that they're much more confident on that one.
Okay, so there are 2 points of logic, right? One is it's just a coin toss, and you're saying, hey, we both know how to do this. At least we know how to do the dungeon. The other thing that you can say is you've definitely seen every team play this, so you have seen your opponent play it, and you already kind of have their time in mind.
Yeah, I mean, that's just it. But the thing is, there's only so many ways you can go with this dungeon. I mean, we saw a couple of, you know, quirky skips from D earlier, but from Skyline D, but I mean, it's so straightforward. You know, I agree with you to a certain extent. They're saying, hey, we've seen everyone do this dungeon. It's the standard dungeon. It's the same affixes as before. We can just do it better than you. But, you know, both teams probably right now are like, okay. I mean, sure, we did this before, we've been practicing. So both teams have got to be really confident about this map. So it's gonna make for a quick match, I think.
I think the big thing is, as well, when we think about this one, this is really, we saw in this series in general, in this elimination series, we've seen some stuff that's been a little bit less than clean. I think that's really going to be the key here. Any mistake is just enough to really end the series for you.
Yeah, and that's one of the things is, I mean, they want to be able to end the series quickly. They want to make sure that they're, I mean, this is from the first games, you know, they've been preparing for this for, you know, 8 to 9 hours for all night. You know, they've been making sure that they're saying, you know, we want a quick match. We want to be able to show the execution, you know, maybe because they weren't playing as cleanly, they're ending up in this loser's bracket. They're saying, hey, we know we can do this. We want to execute better. Let's get it done.
I still do think it says a lot picking this map, and I'm not sure if I like the pick. I'm going to be completely honest. I don't really think that. I think that there are stronger things that you can do when you have this map selection can determine if you
are your tournament life.
100%.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I don't have anything else to add because it's just about. I mean, it seems kind of lazy to me because this isn't a map that you wouldn't expect the other team to practice. It's not a map where you're trying to throw a curveball with the affixes. It's just kind of, it's almost like they ran out of ideas, Rich.
Yeah, and also the other thing to note, too, I mentioned how this is going to be the last dungeon that we actually do see today, but before we call it a day, and actually return tomorrow and progress through that bracket, deem our champion and deem the 2 teams that are going to progress to the global LAN. The other thing is this is actually going to be the last 22 this weekend, the last 22 for this region. We'll see 22s when we actually get to jump into the other regions in the upcoming weeks, but from here on out, Jack, we're going to see 23s and 24s. It's
going to be really interesting to see just the step up in difficulty, you know, where you're seeing we're practicing these dungeons at a certain level. We're practicing our counter picks, for example, to 22s. That might be pretty close to when you're going to the 23s, but when we start graduating up to the 24s, you know, how our strategy is going to change. How are we going to be a little bit more, you know, conservative? How are we going to be playing a little bit more safe when we're going up just a little bit higher here and there?
It doesn't matter what the difficulty is as we jump into this map because the stakes could not be higher. One team will be sent packing. It's all tied up. YingYingYing versus Shepi.
Sent packing right away from their computer down into their bedroom because they're already at home, Rich.
Manning the lifeboats ready to go. We are seeing, of course, YingYingYing and Team Shepi going out with, you know, pretty standard, you know, builds, just standard class. Yes,
Jack, it's okay. I think we're going to see, you and I are on the same page on this one. We're going to see, of course, right away, all of the trash straight into Imran. We're going to see how both teams manage to handle, of course, any of the residual damage. Tons of group damage going out all the time. You know, we have the Defiant Strikes going out. You have the Shield Maidens going out. I mean, just the list goes on and on for the dangerous damage that doesn't even have anything to do with the tank.
That's right, and it's a lot of the focus on the healer, and I think this is more of just a healing focus pull anyway, and you want to be making sure that as a healer, you're able to identify between the debuffs you want to be able to get dispelled very, very rapidly, either with, you know, just a direct dispel or in the Paladin's case, using Hand of Freedom for any of the roots, that are going to be dragging any of your allies into those mobs and helping cleave them down. It can be especially deadly when you're having the AoE Fear coming out on the side of Yimmeron. But it's also just making sure that you're able to have that control for on the side of, say, your double melee comps, where you're able to make sure you're spreading out, you're not getting any of the puddles out on anybody, even when you're getting that early death.
So already advantage in favor of Team Shepi. I mean, we've already had a death over on YingYingYing's side. We're almost had a second one. We've had Perk proc on the Blood Decay, and they've already used their Battle Res Jack, so big advantage there. Now, you know, a lot of this map, you know, we've talked about these bosses time and time again throughout the day. Yes, you know, make sure you get out of the fear, make sure you cave back in, make sure you bait the ads properly, don't get hit by the swirlies, etc., etc. But the real discussion here is these teams are so well trained in mass pulls in this dungeon, and there's a really threatening affix with that in the form of bursting. So how do you think the two healers are going to be able to handle those? And do you think a paladin in this case, which can pre-immune versus, you know, incarning for the druid, is that going to affect their kind of pull size or pull quality?
One of the big things that you have to take in mind is just the quaking differences of where it's factoring into the bursting. You know, you are able to get a number of different instant cast abilities with the paladin, through Light of Dawn, through Holy Shock, that you're able to get, but outside of that, the follow-up to that is quite low, and you're seeing, you know, Shepi's having some very, very early deaths with their mass pulls. We were seeing YingYingYing being a little bit sloppy on their first pull. Now it's kind of Shepi's turn to kind of bounce back to that, and you're seeing the paladin bubble up really, really quickly there, just taking so much damage from the dogs jumping.
This pull is just so dangerous because you have so much damage going out on the group and so much AoE denial in this small hallway on top of quaking. You have those barrels going out that you need to dodge because they do a ton of damage if they hit you. You have the Swift Blades, excuse me, going into their ghost form. Area denial, they sweep in front of them too. And then of course you have the Soul Keeper running around, Defiant striking in circles, all in this small hallway. Pull the dogs on top of that. And then of course you also have, as I mentioned, quaking going out in the meantime. So it's no wonder that the moment they got in there, both DHs just fell right over.
And you're seeing the same thing happening on the side of YingYingYing. There's actually with a full-on wipe here. Shepi was able to recover a little bit here and there, but YingYingYing not able to, having a full wipe, getting a full reset there. But you're also seeing, actually, Team Shepi may have just messed up part of their pull. Yeah, their Warlock wasn't actually quite quick enough. But, I mean, they will get picked up by the Paladin's mass res here, so it's not the end of the world, but just a little extra deaths have been, you know,
those extra 5 seconds. And, you know, we talked about this in the last MDI too. I mean, we're reaching the end of a fairly long day for some of these teams and for everybody here. So it's bound that you're going to see some fatigue in these players. I mean, these are just kind of amateur mistakes here. You know, the Warlock not getting fast enough across, things like that. Things that, you know, if these teams were in their fresh status, you'd probably not see, but it's possible that these players are just fatigued a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's the fatigue and it's, you know, trying to fight for their very tournament lives. The teams that are, of course, winning are having their matches going up till tomorrow, so they are having, you know, that reward for their good performance. They are having that extra benefit that they get to just take a break. They're done for the night. But again, YingYingYing, Team Shepi, they just want to fight for their very tournament lives because the loser of this one is going to be going home.
Right you are, Jack. So, of course, we do pull the two champions prior to going up to Harboron on the remainder of the ship. We have to be careful, making sure both of these champions are interrupted. I would assume that one Havoc Demon Hunter is assigned to each of them in order to gain that extra resource from their successful interrupts. Whilst in the meantime, of course, YingYingYing now moving along the boat as well.
Yeah, and you're seeing this. What's kind of interesting is when you're not running with these extra rogue comps, where you're not running and you're not relying on, for example, the extra cleave damage that you're going to be getting out of that. They're keeping all the mobs downstairs. They're not pulling anything extra into Harboron there. But again, I think at this point, like you were talking about, when they have that extra fatigue that might be setting in, when they, you know, maybe the extra tilt that, you know, the games that they have been losing over the course of the night, they just want to play clean. They just want to take it slow. They want to make sure that they're doing whatever they can not to, you know, get into that tilt situation. They're not getting into any unnecessary risks.
And we do know MOS, Maw of Souls here, you know, as typical of a map as it is, it's very easy to spiral out of control, especially with these huge trash pulls. So there's going to be a lot of eyes on the next trash pull after Harboron. But let's talk a bit about Harboron, of course, here. We do have the typical abilities that we're used to. We have that Cosmic Scythe that you do want to move out of the way if it does a fair bit of damage. And of course, we have that Nether Rip, which is kind of some area denial, forcing you to kind of, as a group, make sure you communicate properly and move around together, because there are two abilities, one of them being the ads that just spawn there, those mirrored images, and of course, that extra servitor ad that he spawns. Those are spawned on players. So if they're by themselves across the platform from where we see Shepi right now, then they're spawning ad way across. It's going to be really hard to interrupt and help support DPSing those ads.
Yeah, as you're seeing, the Warlock is trying to run kind of where the melee DPS is going to be going. So if it is going to go on him, they are able to move out of those nether rifts. They are able to move out of those void zones. And you're seeing he's moving just a little bit ahead of them. Ad may spawn on him, and that way everyone's able to move as a group, get out of the nether rifts that are just about to be spawning. And as you're seeing, dealing with the fragments is just quite easy when you have a double Havoc Demon Hunter. It's able to absolutely annihilate them.
Ooh, and we do take a bit of a hit there on that Warlock. I think it was from the Scythe, if I'm not. No, it was actually from the ad, taking the Servitor to spawn on the side. You got to be really careful. That Cosmic Scythe hits really, really hard. And if you did get hit by it, it's love it for a Scythe, if I'm not mistaken. Now, moving up, in the meantime, Harboron also getting chiseled down. YingYingYing has indeed moved up as well. They'll be rotating around the front of the ship. You want to make sure you don't kind of corner yourself, because you could have some really bad Nether Rift spawns, and then you'll be trapped in the corner and not have much, well, anywhere to go and be caught by that Scythe in the meantime.
That's exactly right, and you also want to be able to have that extra space for whenever you get the combo that comes out of having the Servant in addition to the Fragment going out. So you're seeing they just really, really rapidly dealt with the Fragment, then they're able to deal with the Servant, making sure they're getting those kicks, getting those extra resources out of it.
Right, Jack. So all eyes here, like we said earlier. Now this is where typically we see a huge pull coming up. So we'll either see, no, they're actually opting to hang back. So we see an aggressive stance, or what it likely leads from a more passive into an aggressive stance here. Sometimes teams opt to use that Skystep Potion and just pull the entire ship. Here we're likely going to see them pull an entire side, plus a couple of the mobs, maybe one of the champions on the far side, as we're seeing right now. They're going to go right to the back of the ship. Whether or not they pull Skjall with this, I don't think they are. They're going to chill with Skjall right now.
They'll just settle for almost all the entire ship.
Yeah, almost all of them, almost all of them. Now, it's really important here that they interrupt properly. There's lots of heals going out in the form of Torrent, lots of heals that need Surging Mist that need to interrupt. So, interrupts needed, CC needed, and eventually, if the damage is too overwhelming, the DK is going to have to start to kite, and this is where things start to fall apart if this is not done properly here.
Yeah, it's a very big risk that they'll be taking there, but it's one pull that they've likely just been practicing forever, but the DK is just dropping so low there. Tremendous amount of damage, like you're saying, and that kite starts beginning. They're trying to get, some of the ads, just a little bit of space here. Purgatory has popped. Tank is going down here. The Paladin just bubbles, just starts running for his life. The Warlock is just running close behind him. And it's nice to see the Demon Hunter, of course, just bringing all those ads away. That way you're giving your casters a little bit more space.
No, what they should do afterwards is immediately head back, because they do have the checkpoint now at Harboron. So now that the DK is released, he needs to get back and grab aggro on those mobs, and if they're being kited away, it's going to maybe get extra difficult. Luckily, they do a good job of recovering, not allowing any of those mobs to reset. Incur a couple deaths here, but they are on their way to Skjall, which is the perfect amount of percentage needed before they get to access Helia, which of course does not become available until Skjall dies and that fog wall goes down.
And you see the death differential here for Team Shepi and YingYingYing. It's actually quite tightened together. YingYingYing just incurring just another additional death though, and it's still pretty behind on trash. They're still taking it kind of piecemeal. They don't have quite the percent that they need. So the risk that Team Shepi took of having that larger pull, of pulling almost everything on the ship, really has been paying off for them, as they are still ahead in terms of deaths.
They are, but they're also, well, yeah, I mean, both teams are actually fairly close together. We are getting a fair bit ahead on the Shepi side right now. Once they kill Skjall, they just have to wait for that bit of RP before Helia. They've already accessed their 100%. I mean, they're starting to slow down on the YingYingYing side. It seems they've gone past that initial burst right now, pulling some of the extra mobs, and they're really kind of slowly dealing with it. But if I'm not mistaken, I believe Skjall is in that... No, he's actually
right just hanging out right outside of it.
Looks like they're kind of rearing to pull him in a moment, or they're just barely kiting near them on the stairs. So they're looking to finish off those last couple of Soul Keepers, and of course the Swift Blades as well, whilst in the meantime, Shepi on the main screen here has indeed finished off Skjall. They're finishing up the last of the Skeleton Warriors and Mages, and will be jumping down to join Helia on the poop deck.
That's right. Right as YingYingYing is bringing Skjall into the mix, Shepi is done with them, done with all the extra trash to it. The RP is done for Helia, and they're already ready and set to engage here. So it's a nice lead that they have just right off the rip here, making sure they're getting quite a big advantage going into this fight. And at this point, they just need to be able to play as cleanly, as safely as possible to seal this game out.
So we do know that they have to kill a total of 6 tentacles. Does not matter if you kill Graspings or Destructors. Destructors, of course, are the more dangerous ones. They do need to be tanked, and if no one's in melee range of them, they will pulse, increasing damage on the group. Group doing well here to move to the left side of the ship, as Helia does cast on our right side. Anybody who's caught in that will likely be one-shot, or at least in range of one-shot here. Now, one other trick to note is that the Destructor Tentacles can spawn in one of several positions on the boat, so it's important that the group, which did well there, to kind of stick together to make sure that the Tentacle doesn't accidentally spawn, let's say, near one of the healers and kills them.
Yeah, and you're seeing that movement that was going out on the side of Team Shepi. If you're able to get like a top-down view, you're able to see, of course, where everyone's going to be positioned in relation to the boat. Everyone's trying to stick to the right side or left sides of the ships, that are making sure, for example, that they're able to stay out of the way, because they don't want to be having any of those deaths there. It looks like the tank maybe just didn't get aggro quite quite quick enough on one of the Destructor Tentacles, or might have just been in a poor position. So you are seeing the Havoc Demon Hunter going down there and just losing out on a little bit of extra damage. And but thankfully, like I said, they do have the battle reses. They do have one more left available.
Then both teams indeed do have one, but that extra death was unfortunately canceled out by another death on YingYingYing. So we still have that 2-death differential between the two teams. Finally, we do see Shepi cleaning up the last of the tentacles. They will be going through the smaller P phase where Helia will shatter the front of the ship, and then they will enter phase 2, where she will be up for about a minute prior to going downstairs in her AFK phase for about 20 seconds. So goal of most of these teams is to try and kill her before that phase, but we haven't seen any of the teams actually succeed in doing that today.
That's right, and you want to be able to pump out as much damage as possible. You want to be able to just one-phase it if at all possible there, because there is that huge period of just downtime. You're just kind of running around the ship, and it is causing more of the tentacles to really be spawning there. So it's very, very important to be able to pump out as much damage as you can. Paladin just contributing huge, huge amounts of damage there, trying to do whatever he can to kind of catch up to the DK tank there. But ideally, just staying safe, and again, one of the safest areas you really can be is just in that middle area, really, really close to where the tank is standing, or almost exactly where the tank is standing, or on either the far left or far right sides.
Right, sure, and of course, the likely Havoc Demon Hunter is doing well to interrupt there to gain that resource as well. There is a 2 melee/tank DPS interrupt requirement on this boss. Of course, some of the other casters and hunters have a longer interrupt CD innately, but they do well here. Now, Helia, Helia does die, well, essentially die, goes away, let's say, at 70.5%. It doesn't look like they'll be able to one-phase it. We're reaching kind of the third breath phase in just a moment, and after this, very shortly after this, she will go downstairs, so I don't think they'll be able to finish it off, so they will have to deal with that 20-second cycle in just a moment. But unfortunately, YingYingYing is just nowhere nearby, so the only way that YingYingYing has any hope of staying alive in this tournament is some type of miraculous wipe from Shepi right now, and barring them going whole spelunking at the moment, I just don't see that happening in any other way.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You're just seeing the safety there, just taking advantage of the massive extra DPS that they've been able to deal. They have 2% left on Helia to actually deal in order to get this game sealed out.
Hell yeah!
Hell yeah, indeed. Ultimately, it is going to be Shepi who comes out on top with their own map pick. And, I do want to say a few things about this really quick. And one of the big things I do want to note is obviously they did look relatively well rehearsed on it, even as far as their Warlock's talent choices, right? We see some interesting stuff going on there that was obviously targeted for that dungeon, actually using that Grimory of Service there and having that Fellhound, getting out that second Fellhound so you can utilize those pet abilities. But all that being said, if this team wants to do well in this tournament, I think one thing was kind of shown, one thing in their hand was shown. They might not have the deepest map pool, so they're going to need to come out tomorrow with some more maps, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, like you're saying, I do think they were able to pull it out where they're saying that, hey, we're a lot more confident on this map, but it is very risky when you're saying, we're going to pick the map that everyone's practiced. We're going to pick this map, we're going to just kind of hope that we're going to be better than them. And while it did work out for them here, like you said, coming in tomorrow, you have a lot more maps you have to do. A lot of maps are actually changed up from, the first initial pool, and the difficulty gets higher.
Against even more difficult teams as well. Yes, the dungeons themselves get more difficult, and the opponents that you will be facing get more difficult. And the thing is, too, is when you look at these two teams and how they stacked up on the time trials for this map, I was actually talking to Sowers in the back, there's only a 2-second differential, so it's not like you know something special if you are Shepi in this particular matchup. And all in all, major congratulations to them, because Salute, they will advance.
Yeah, they will, but just in this match alone, I mean, their strategies really weren't very different. The 2-second differential showing that Sowers talked about, but it's just one team just executed better, DPS'd a bit harder. We had a 2-death differential at the end, so nothing too huge there, but their pull patterns, YingYingYing just did everything a bit slower. DPS did everything a bit slower. The top of the ship was done slower. It took them ages to finally get to skill and pull him.
Yeah, that is definitely a thing, and some of that will need to be cleaned up as we get into our day tomorrow, but we're going to take a look at where all these teams did fall on our bracket. And keep in mind, this is going to be a double elimination tournament, so quite a few of these teams still going to get to be hanging out in those semifinals. You see Skyline D and SunSky. They have yet to drop a series in this tournament, Jack.
That's right. They've yet to drop a series. They've really shown, again, being in that 6th, 7th seed, or 6th, 7th rank worldwide, they're really showing their ability just to absolutely dominate the other Chinese teams and really just setting the bar.
Yeah, I mean, definitely they're going to do just that. And now we only have 6 teams left in this tournament, Sloop, but only 2 of them are going to be able to advance to that land.
Yeah, but as dominant as Skyline D was, I mean, the teams that played them, although they 2-0'd, they really held their own. I mean, the Skyline versus Skyline series, that was really close. We had to replay one of the matches, still close the second time around too. And, you know, the Sun matches too were really close, so it's going to be a huge series between them tomorrow.
Man, I am just so excited for tomorrow, but that's going to do it for us here today. Do not forget to tune in tomorrow, same time, same place. We're going to see you at 11 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much for watching the first day of the MDI for the China region. I know that it's different times no matter where you are in the world, but your support was definitely felt. We started with 8 teams though, and now we are down to just 6. When we see you tomorrow, we will crown our champion, see who is taking home this prize pool, and find the 2 teams from China that will go to the first Mythic Dungeon Invitational LAN.